Everyone blames the Bermuda Triangle. The real story is far stranger, and it happened nowhere near it. On the 8th of January 1949, a British South American Airways Avro York took off from Ciudad Trujillo in the Dominican Republic bound for Jamaica. 36 souls aboard. The aircraft, registered as G. Agson but known to her crew as the Star Ariel, climbed into a clear Caribbean sky at 4:10 in the morning. For the first hour, everything was routine. Radio contact was steady. The captain reported good weather. Then, at 5:41 a.m., the last transmission crackled through. "We are experiencing difficulty with our high-frequency radio direction finder. We are now on the line north of Montego Bay. We are flying at 1,800 feet." And then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Here in the museum, we keep the manifest. This document right here, 39 names, passengers and crew, most of them routine, a few notable souls, a civil engineer, a couple of businessmen heading to Jamaica for work. But what's curious is what happened next. The disappearance landed squarely in the public imagination as the Bermuda Triangle's latest victim. Newspapers ran with it. Magazines speculated wildly. Supernatural forces, magnetic anomalies, portals to another dimension. The Triangle's legend was only 5 years old in 1949, still being constructed, and the Star Ariel became one of its founding myths. The official inquiry, though, told a different story. The British Civil Aviation Authority launched a comprehensive investigation. They interviewed every ground station that had contact with the aircraft. They examined weather reports. They studied the York's maintenance records going back years, and they reached a conclusion that satisfied almost no one. The Star Ariel had likely suffered a structural failure, possibly a pressurization issue or a fatigue crack in the fuselage. It sank into the sea somewhere north of Jamaica. Case closed, reasonable, supported by evidence, boring. But here's where we need to pause, because the official story, while plausible, rested on one critical assumption, that the Star Ariel went down in the Caribbean. That assumption was never tested against the actual evidence. In fact, the aircraft was never found, not a single piece of wreckage, not a life raft, not a body, nothing. In an era before widespread satellite surveillance, search and rescue operations relied on drift analysis and hope. They looked in the wrong places. Or perhaps the right places, but not far enough. The Star Ariel's last confirmed position was north of Montego Bay, Jamaica, about 120 nautical miles east-southeast of Miami, nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle as it's commonly mapped. The triangle in popular imagination stretches between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. The York was well outside that boundary, yet the legend persisted. Why? Because mystery sells better than geography. Now let's look at what we actually know about the Star Ariel herself. She was built in 1945, a 4-engine cargo and transport aircraft. Sturdy, reliable, the RAF had used Yorks extensively during the war, but this particular aircraft had logged thousands of hours by 1949. The maintenance logs show routine inspections, nothing alarming. Yet there were whispers in the aviation community, nothing documented. Mind you, but persistent, about pressurization problems on some Yorks operating in tropical climates. The captain that morning was a man named Roy Groves Costello, experienced, respected, 15,000 hours in his logbook. He knew that aircraft and he knew the Caribbean route. So when he reported difficulty with our high-frequency radio direction finder, he wasn't panicking, he was being precise. He was doing what captains do, informing ground control of a problem, assessing the situation, flying the aircraft. His final transmission placed them at 1,800 feet, which is low enough to navigate visually, high enough to clear most terrain. But here's the detail that changes everything. Radio direction finders in 1949 weren't redundant systems. If the primary RDF failed and Costello reported difficulty, not failure, he had limited alternatives: dead reckoning, visual landmarks, and in the pre-dawn darkness over open ocean, visual navigation was nearly impossible. The aircraft was now, in effect, flying blind relative to ground stations. They could hear him, but he couldn't hear them clearly. Communication was degrading. Here's where the official narrative begins to fracture. After that final transmission at 5:41 a.m., ground control at Montego Bay heard nothing. They waited. They called repeatedly on multiple frequencies. Silence. Within hours, a search was initiated, but the search teams didn't know where to look. The York's last known position was north of Montego Bay, vague because Costello was giving them a heading, not a precise fix. In the chaos of a missing aircraft, that distinction matters enormously. Now let me show you something. This telegram right here, sent from the Jamaican authorities to London on the morning of the 8th. It says, and I quote from memory, that wreckage had been spotted in the waters east of Jamaica, a piece of fuselage, an oil slick. But when recovery teams reached the coordinates, there was nothing, no debris, no confirmation. The report was false. A fishing boat had seen something, garbage, flotsam, nothing related to the Star Ariel. The confusion cost precious hours. The search expanded. Days passed. Ships crisscrossed the Caribbean. Aircraft flew patrol routes and nothing was found, not a single confirmed piece of the Star Ariel. The Civil Aviation Authority's conclusion, structural failure, aircraft sank, was logical, but it was also unfalsifiable. Without wreckage, without bodies, without physical evidence, it was educated guessing dressed up as investigation. But here's what the official report missed, and what modern analysis of the Star Ariel's route suggests. The aircraft may not have gone down in the Caribbean at all. The radio direction finder failure combined with dead reckoning errors in darkness over featureless ocean could have pushed the York significantly off course. Not dramatically, just enough. A navigation error of 15 or 20 miles compounded over an hour becomes catastrophic. The Star Ariel was headed for Montego Bay, but without a functioning RDF, without radio contact with ground stations, without visual references, the crew couldn't confirm their position. They were flying on compass heading and airspeed calculations. In the pre-dawn gloom over open water, those calculations compound errors, and if Costello descended lower to try to spot a landmark, a light, a coastline, anything, he risked hitting the water at night. Disorientation, spatial confusion, it's happened before, it's happened since. The real explanation, supported by subsequent accident investigations and aviation research, is almost certainly this. The Star Ariel suffered a navigational emergency, not a structural one. The RDF failure was the trigger. Disorientation in darkness was the consequence, and the aircraft went down in the open Atlantic much farther east than the search teams ever looked, miles deeper, in water so deep and so vast that a single aircraft from 1949 simply vanishes, not mysteriously, just completely. This is why the Bermuda Triangle myth took hold. Not because the Star Ariel vanished in the triangle, it didn't, but because it vanished completely. No wreckage, no answers, just names and dates and a last radio transmission. In the post-war era, when aviation was still young and the ocean was still vast and mysterious, that was enough to spawn legends. The triangle needed victims. The Star Ariel was available. Crew and passengers of the Star Ariel deserve better than myth. They deserve the truth, as boring as it is. A navigation failure, a radio malfunction, darkness, disorientation, and then the Atlantic, not supernatural, not mysterious in the paranormal sense, but mysterious in the way that the ocean always is, vast, indifferent, and final. Their story is a lesson in how accidents happen, how investigations stumble, and how legends are born from the gaps in our knowledge. The Star Ariel remains unsolved in the public mind, filed away under Bermuda Triangle mysteries. But in the archives of aviation history, she's solved. The answer isn't spectacular. It's not what sells books or spawns documentaries. It's just what happened, a sequence of failures, each manageable alone, catastrophic in combination. And that's often how the real mysteries of aviation end, not with a bang, but with a radio transmission that cuts to static. Subscribe to uncover the real stories behind aviation's greatest mysteries, where the truth is stranger than the legend.